The massive dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled under the light of 3 nearby suns. Inside, representatives from over 50 alien species sat in circular rows that rose like steps toward the ceiling. The chamber, usually filled with quiet discussions and peaceful debates, now buzzed with panic. First Speaker Ross stood at his podium, his gray hair neat despite the emergency meeting being called in the middle of the station's night cycle. Next to him, Ambassador James Miller watched the chaos unfold with steady eyes. Both humans remained calm while alien representatives shouted over each other. 3 more colony worlds have gone silent, shouted a tall, blue-skinned representative, his voice shaking. The pathogen is spreading faster than we can track it. My people have lost contact with 12 trading vessels in the outer sectors, called another voice from the upper rows. We must act now. The council leader, a tall being with silver skin, raised all 4 of its arms for silence. We understand the gravity of the situation. This spaceborne pathogen is unlike anything we have encountered. It affects multiple species and spreads through ship-to-ship contact. We need volunteers for a containment mission. The chamber fell silent. Too silent. Ambassador Miller watched as representatives shifted in their seats, looking anywhere but at the council leader. He shared a knowing look with First Speaker Ross. They had seen this before, not in space, but in humanity's history. When disaster struck, some ran away, others ran toward it. The mission would require entering infected zones. The council leader continued. We need ships and crews willing to rescue stranded vessels, establish quarantine protocols, and research the pathogen's nature. The risk level is extreme. A reptilian representative stood up. My people are known for our bravery in battle, but this is madness. We cannot risk our best ships and crews on what could be a suicide mission. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. One by one, representatives stood to decline. Some cited the risk. Others claimed they lacked the resources. Many simply shook their heads or remained silent. First Speaker Ross stepped forward. His voice, though not particularly loud, carried across the chamber with clarity. Earth will volunteer. The chamber erupted again, but this time with laughter. The blue-skinned representative who had spoken earlier pointed at the humans. You? The species known for excessive safety protocols. The ones who took 50 years just to approve faster-than-light travel because you had to test everything 100 times. The very same, Ross replied, his face showing no reaction to the mockery. We will provide ships and crews for this mission. Your species is known for being overcautious, called another voice. You require safety measures for even the simplest space operations. Ambassador Miller stepped forward to join Ross. Yes, we are cautious. We plan. We prepare. We take precautions. He paused, looking around the chamber. And that is exactly why we are perfect for this mission. The laughter died down as Miller continued. Throughout human history, when disaster struck, when buildings burned, when diseases spread, when earthquakes shattered cities, there were always those who ran toward danger to help others. We call them first responders, emergency services, disease control experts, search and rescue teams. He pressed a button on his podium, and images appeared in the chamber's holographic display. Firefighters entering burning buildings, medical teams in protective gear treating Ebola patients, search and rescue workers climbing through earthquake rubble. We are cautious not because we are cowards, but because we understand danger. We respect it, we prepare for it, and when the time comes, we face it. First Speaker Ross nodded. Earth will commit 3 ships to this mission. Each will be crewed by volunteers and equipped with our best quarantine and medical facilities. We have extensive experience with pandemic protocols from our own history. We will begin preparation immediately. The council leader's silver skin rippled, their species' expression of surprise. You understand the risks, the danger to your crews. We do, Ross replied, and we accept them. As the human representatives left the chamber to begin preparations, the alien representatives watched in silence. They had always seen human caution as a weakness, their obsession with safety protocols as cowardice. Now, as their own courage failed them, they began to wonder if they had misunderstood humanity all along. Outside the chamber, Miller turned to Ross. "How many volunteers do you think we'll get?" Ross smiled slightly. "You know our people, James. The real question is how many we'll have to turn away." Earth's Space Command Center hummed with activity. Screens covered the walls, showing news from across the galaxy about the spreading pathogen. But unlike the panic in the Galactic Council chamber, here there was purpose. There was order. Captain Tom Walker stood before the assembled crowd in the main briefing room. 300 people filled the seats, with more standing along the walls. These were the volunteers, pilots, doctors, engineers, and scientists. All had stepped forward when the call went out. All knew the risks. "The mission is simple," Walker said, his voice firm, "but not easy. We will enter infected space with 3 ships. We will find survivors. We will establish quarantine zones, and we will stop this thing before it spreads further." Dr. Alice Green, the lead scientist, stepped forward. Her white hair was tied back neatly as she pulled up holographic images of infected ships they'd received from the Galactic Council. "The pathogen spreads through ship-to-ship contact," she explained. "It appears to be some form of spaceborne virus that can affect multiple species. We've never seen anything like it. But," she smiled slightly, "we've dealt with unknown diseases before. We've fought pandemics. We've contained outbreaks. This is what we do." A young engineer raised his hand. "What about the alien ships? They're more advanced than ours. If their crews couldn't handle this, what chance do we have?" Walker nodded at the question. "They have better ships, yes, faster engines, stronger weapons, but we have something they don't." He paused, looking around the room. "Experience with disaster response. While other species focused on making their ships faster and their weapons stronger, we focused on making our ships safer. They laughed at our airlocks, our backup systems, our quarantine protocols. They won't be laughing now." The room filled with determined nods. They all knew humanity's history with safety measures. What other species saw as excessive caution, they knew as necessary preparation. Dr. Green brought up new images. "Each ship will be equipped with a full medical bay and research lab. We've modified our standard quarantine protocols based on what we know about the pathogen. Every crew member will have the latest in protective gear." Speaking of crews, Walker continued, "We need 90 people total, 30 per ship. Medical staff, engineers, pilots." He was cut off by the sound of everyone in the room standing up. 300 volunteers, all ready to go, all ready to risk their lives to save others. Walker looked at them with pride, but shook his head. "We'll conduct interviews. We need the best teams possible. Not just the most skilled, but people who can work together under extreme pressure." The selection process took 3 days. In the end, 90 were chosen, with another 90 as backup crews. The rest would support from Earth, analyzing data and coordinating the mission. On the morning of launch day, the crews gathered before their ships. The vessels themselves weren't the most impressive in the galaxy, not the fastest or the most powerful, but they were sturdy, reliable, and equipped with every safety measure humans had developed over centuries of space travel. As Walker walked toward his ship, named Hope, a message came through from the Galactic Council. He played it over the hangar speakers. "We have received reports of 2 more systems going dark," the council leader's voice said. Are your crews still willing to proceed, given the increased danger?" Walker looked at his people. Engineers were doing final checks on environmental suits. Medical staff were reviewing quarantine procedures. Scientists were calibrating their equipment. No one looked scared. Focused, yes. Careful, absolutely. But not afraid. "We're not just willing," Walker replied. "We're ready." Dr. Green joined him at the ship's entrance. "You know what's funny?" she said, checking her tablet one last time. Other species think we're cowards because we take precautions. They never understood that being cautious and being brave aren't opposites. Walker nodded. The bravest people I know are also the most careful. You don't run into a burning building without proper gear. You don't fight a disease without protection. That's not cowardice. That's how you survive long enough to save others. The launch countdown began. 3 ships, 90 humans, ready to enter the most dangerous part of space in the galaxy. While other species retreated, humanity stepped forward. Not recklessly, but prepared. Not fearlessly, but with courage. As the ships lifted off, Walker sent one final message to Earth. Hope, mercy, and courage. Launching now. We'll make humanity proud. The edge of infected space looked deceptively peaceful. Stars twinkled against the black void, same as anywhere else. But the 3 human ships, Hope, Mercy, and Courage, knew better. Their sensors were already picking up distress signals from dozens of abandoned vessels. Medical Officer Mike Reynolds stood at his station on the Hope, watching the first infected ship come into view. It was massive. An alien cargo vessel 3 times the size of their ship. Its engines were dark, and it drifted silently through space. All crews, suit up. Captain Walker's voice came through the comm system. Remember your training. No shortcuts. No risks. We do this by the book. Reynolds watched as his medical team put on their protective suits, checking and double-checking each other's seals. Engineer Pat Wilson's team did the same, preparing their equipment for boarding. First contact in 10 minutes, Walker announced. Hope will approach the cargo vessel. Mercy and Courage maintain safe distance and monitor for any changes. The cargo ship grew larger in their viewport. Reynolds could see the alien writing on its hull, probably its name and registration. But what caught his attention were the scorch marks around its airlocks, signs of a desperate crew trying to contain something. Scanning for life signs, Reynolds reported, eyes on his instruments. The room fell silent as data streamed in. Then, a beep. Captain, we've got survivors. Weak signals, but they're there. At least 12 life forms in the cargo hold. Walker's voice remained steady. Boarding team, prepare for rescue operation. Remember, we're not just saving them. We're learning how this pathogen spreads. Every observation matters. Wilson's engineering team went first, using their specialized equipment to create a safe passage to the cargo ship's airlock. They moved slowly, methodically, each step checked and verified. Some might call it overcautious. They called it staying alive. Airlock secured, Wilson reported. Atmospheric readings. Interesting. The pathogen leaves traces in the air. It's almost like spores. Reynolds watched his data screen as more information came in. That matches what we're seeing. It's not just a virus. It's something that can survive in space. No wonder it spreads ship to ship. The rescue team moved through the cargo ship's corridors, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. Emergency power was still running, but barely. The air was thick with floating particles that their sensors identified as the pathogen. Contact, called one of the rescue team. We found them. In the cargo hold, 12 alien crew members huddled together. They were alive, but barely. Their environmental suits had protected them, but their power was almost gone. When they saw the human rescue team, their expressions showed a mixture of relief and confusion. Why? One of them rasped through a translator. Why did you come? Our own people wouldn't. That's not our way, Reynolds said, already checking their vital signs. Now save your strength. We're getting you out of here. The evacuation was slow and careful. Each survivor was decontaminated before being moved to Hope's quarantine bay. Every step followed strict protocols developed from centuries of handling dangerous diseases on Earth. As they worked, Reynolds made another discovery. Captain, he called, I'm seeing something in their blood work. The pathogen. It's not killing them directly. It's doing something else. Explain, Walker ordered. It's like it's changing them. altering their cellular structure. I've never seen anything like it. Reynolds paused. But the pattern, it reminds me of something from Earth's history, the way certain parasites can influence their hosts. Wilson's voice came through the comm. Captain, we're finding similar patterns in the ship's systems. Whatever this is, it's not just affecting living things. It's changing the ship itself. Like it's adapting everything it touches. Walker was quiet for a moment. Document everything. Every detail matters. This isn't just a rescue mission anymore. We're dealing with something that could change the face of the galaxy itself. As the last survivor was brought aboard, Reynolds looked back at the infected ship. In the darkness of space, its hull seemed to shimmer slightly, as if something was moving beneath the surface. All teams, return to Hope, Walker ordered. We've got what we came for. Now the real work begins. The 3 human ships moved away from the cargo vessel, their quarantine bays now holding the first survivors rescued from infected space. But as they prepared to move to their next target, everyone knew this was just the beginning. The true challenge still lay ahead. The quarantine lab aboard the Hope buzzed with activity. Dr. Reynolds hadn't slept in 20 hours, but his eyes remained focused on the microscope screen. The pathogen samples from the rescued alien showed patterns he'd never seen before, yet something about them seemed familiar. Look at this, he called to Dr. Green, who had transferred from Mercy to help with the research. Remember the cordyceps fungus from Earth? The one that controls insect behavior. Dr. Green leaned in, her eyes widening. Yes, this is similar, but far more advanced. This pathogen isn't just controlling its hosts, it's rebuilding them. Captain Walker entered the lab, his face showing the strain of 3 days of continuous rescue operations. They had saved crews from 5 ships now, but for every vessel they cleared, 3 more sent distress signals. Please tell me you have something, Walker said, rubbing his tired eyes. Reynolds pointed to his screen. We might. We've been looking at this all wrong. Everyone thought this was a simple virus, but it's more like a programmer. Explain, Walker said, moving closer. Dr. Green brought up a holographic display showing the pathogen structure. It's not trying to kill, it's trying to rewrite both organic life and machine systems. That's why it affects both ships and crews. It's trying to create something new. But here's what's interesting, Reynolds added. Look at how our rescued crews are responding to treatment. He pulled up another display. Their immune systems, once given the right support, are actually fighting back. Not just fighting, adapting. Walker looked between the 2 doctors. So why aren't other species handling this better? Why did they retreat instead of fight? Because they're too advanced, Dr. Green said with a slight smile. Their medical technology is so good, their immune systems never had to develop like ours did. They never faced the challenges Earth threw at us, the constant evolution of diseases that need to adapt. Reynolds nodded excitedly. Exactly. Humanity's primitive medical history is actually our strength. We still have the basic biological programming to fight back against unknown threats. Our bodies remember the old battles. Can we use this? Walker asked. We already are, Reynolds replied. We've started giving the survivors small doses of modified Earth probiotics. Their bodies are learning from ours, learning how to fight back. The ship's intercom crackled. Captain to the bridge. We've got a situation. Walker rushed to the bridge, the doctors following. On the main screen, they could see the Courage approaching another infected vessel. But something was wrong. The infected ship's surface was moving, shifting like liquid metal. It's evolving, Dr. Green whispered. The pathogen. It's changing tactics. Engineer Wilson's voice came through from Courage. Captain, we're seeing something new. The pathogen isn't just infecting ships anymore. It's combining them. Like it's trying to build something bigger. Walker's jaw tightened. Pull back. Courage. All ships, maintain safe distance. But as Courage started to retreat, Tendrils of metallic material shot out from the infected vessel. They moved faster than anyone expected, wrapping around Courage's hull. Emergency protocols, Walker shouted. Courage, initiate quarantine procedures. The crew watched as Courage's outer hull began to glow red-hot, a defensive measure humans had developed years ago, but others had dismissed as unnecessary. The heat made the metallic tendrils recoil, buying precious time for Courage to break free. "This is why we prepare," Walker said quietly. "This is why we plan for the worst." Back in the lab, Reynolds and Green worked even faster. Their earlier discovery about human immune responses had to be developed into a weapon, not just a treatment, but a cure. "We're not just fighting a disease," Reynolds said as he worked. "We're fighting an invasion that no one was ready for, except us." Dr. Green looked up from her work. "Because we never stopped being ready. While other species raced to the stars, we crawled carefully, learning every step of the way." Walker watched his crew work, pride mixing with concern on his face. The next few hours would determine not just their success or failure, but possibly the fate of all spacefaring species. "Keep working," he ordered. "We didn't come this far to give up now. If humanity's overcautious nature got us here, then by God, it's going to get us through this." The medical bay of Hope was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. Dr. Reynolds stood at the window, looking at the bodies of 3 crew members from Mercy. They had died saving a group of alien children from an infected transport ship. The rescue had been successful, but the cost was heavy. "They knew the risks," Captain Walker said softly, standing beside Reynolds. "They took all the precautions we could, but sometimes it's not enough." Reynolds finished, his voice tight with emotion. The intercom buzzed. "Captain to the bridge. Emergency transmission from Courage." On the bridge, the screen showed Engineer Wilson's face. His protective suit was scratched, and fear showed in his eyes. "Captain, we found something. Something big. You need to see this." The Hope moved carefully through the debris field to join Courage. As they approached, everyone on the bridge fell silent. Before them floated what looked like a massive space station, but it wasn't built. It was grown. Multiple infected ships had merged together, forming a horrifying new structure. "It's not just combining ships anymore," Wilson reported. "It's building something, using the infected crews and ships like raw materials." Dr. Green's voice came through from the lab. "Captain, I think I know what we're looking at. It's not just an infection. It's a colonization. The pathogen isn't trying to kill. It's trying to transform this sector of space into something else." Walker's face hardened. "How many people are trapped in that thing?" "Sensors show hundreds of life signs," Reynolds answered, checking his screens. "But they're changing, merging with the structure itself. We can save them," Walker said firmly. "The treatment we developed might work," Green interrupted, "but we'd have to get inside that structure to deliver it. And our protective suits weren't designed for whatever this is." Walker looked at the massive structure, then at the pictures of the crew members they'd lost. "We didn't come this far to turn back. Prepare the rescue teams." The next few hours were the hardest they'd faced. Teams from all 3 human ships worked together, cutting their way into the structure. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Alien crew members from dozens of species were half-merged with walls and machinery. The pathogen had broken down the barriers between organic and mechanical, creating something entirely new, and it was still growing. "Set up the distribution points," Walker ordered, "just like we planned. By the book." Reynolds led his medical team through the horror, setting up devices that would spread their treatment throughout the structure. Each step was careful, measured, despite the nightmare around them. But the pathogen fought back. "Watch out!" Someone screamed as a section of wall suddenly came alive, reaching for the nearest team member. The crew member didn't run. Instead, they carefully activated their suits' defense systems, systems other species had called paranoid and unnecessary. The battle for the station cost them dearly. 6 more crew members lost their lives. But slowly, section by section, they began to make progress. The treatment worked, breaking down the pathogen's hold on both machines and living tissue. Back on Hope's Bridge, Walker received a message from Earth. "Captain," First Speaker Ross's voice came through. "The Galactic Council is monitoring your progress. They never expected you to get this far. They're asking what they can do to help." Walker looked at his crew, tired, wounded, mourning their losses, but still fighting. "Tell them to remember this," he replied. "Remember that when everyone else retreated, humanity stepped forward. Not because we were braver, not because we were stronger, but because we were prepared." As the rescue teams returned to their ships, carrying survivors and fallen comrades, Dr. Green made another discovery in her lab. "Captain," she called, her voice urgent. "The pathogen. It's not natural. Someone made this, and I think I know where it came from." Walker looked at the massive structure through the viewport, now slowly breaking apart as the treatment took effect. They had won this battle, but at a terrible cost. And if Green was right, the real fight was just beginning. "Send me everything you found," he ordered. "It's time to find who did this, and make sure it never happens again." The 3 human ships, Hope, Mercy, and Courage, approached the source of the infection. Dr. Green's discovery had led them to a hidden research station deep in uncharted space. The station's design was unlike anything they'd seen before, a mix of technologies from multiple species. "This is it," Dr. Green said, pointing to her findings on the main screen. "The pathogen's origin point. Someone was experimenting with combining organic and mechanical life forms. It got out of control." Captain Walker looked at his crew on the bridge. They were exhausted after weeks of fighting the infection, but determination still showed in their eyes. "How many did we lose getting here?" he asked quietly. 13, Reynolds replied, his voice heavy. "But we saved over 1,000. The station's sensors detected them. A voice crackled over their communication system, speaking in multiple languages at once. "Leave this place. You cannot understand the importance of our work." Walker pressed the comm button. "We understand perfectly. We've seen what your work has done. We've watched people die. We've seen ships and crews twisted into monsters. It ends today." Laughter came through the speakers, a horrible sound of multiple voices merged together. "Ah, the cautious humans. Always so careful. Always so afraid. You think your safety protocols and protective suits can save you here. We have evolved beyond your primitive concerns." "Those primitive concerns kept us alive," Walker responded. "Those safety protocols helped us save others while you hid here, watching your creation destroy innocent people." Suddenly, the station's surface began to shift, just like the infected ships they'd encountered. But this was worse. This was the source, the pure form of the pathogen. "All ships, battle stations," Walker ordered. "Remember your training. No heroics. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." The station attacked first, launching tendrils of living metal toward the human ships. But they were ready. Months of fighting the infection had taught them its weaknesses. "Heat shields to maximum," Engineer Wilson called from Courage. "They don't like it hot." The ship's hulls glowed red-hot, their excessive safety systems proving their worth once again. The tendrils recoiled, but the station wasn't done. It began launching pods. Infected crews turned into living weapons. "They're trying to board us," Reynolds reported from the medical bay. "But our airlocks were designed for exactly this scenario," Walker finished. The multiple airlock systems that other species had mocked as overcautious now trapped the boarding parties in decontamination chambers. Dr. Green worked frantically in her lab. "Captain, the treatment we developed, if we can deliver it to the station's core, it might work. But someone would have to get inside." Walker looked at the tactical display. The station's defenses were strong, but they had found a weakness. A small ship might make it through. "I'll do it," he said, standing up. "Hope will create a distraction. Mercy and courage will protect the delivery ship." "Captain," Reynolds protested, "the concentration of the pathogen in there will be held back by our paranoid protective suits," Walker finished. "At least long enough." The plan worked. At first, Walker's small ship made it through the station's defenses while Hope drew its fire. But as they approached the core, the station revealed its final defense. "The whole place is alive," Walker reported, his voice steady despite the horror around him. "The scientists, they've merged with it completely. They're part of it now." The merged beings attacked, their bodies twisted combinations of flesh and machine. But Walker's team held their ground, fighting their way to the core foot by foot, meter by meter. "Treatment is ready," Walker reported, "but the delivery system is damaged. Have to do it manually." Everyone knew what that meant. Even their best protective suits couldn't withstand direct exposure to the concentrated pathogen. "Captain, don't," Reynolds started. "No choice," Walker replied calmly. "Always knew this might happen. That's why we plan ahead." He paused. "Reynolds, you have command of Hope. Get our people home." With steady hands, Walker connected the treatment containers to the station's core systems. The pathogen attacked immediately, breaking through his suit. But he kept working, even as he felt the changes beginning. His last words came through clearly. "Remember, being careful doesn't mean being afraid." The treatment flooded through the station's systems. The nightmare was ending. But the cost was almost too much to bear. The Galactic Council chamber was fuller than it had ever been. Representatives from every spacefaring species crowded the circular rows. But this time there was no chaos, no shouting. Only respectful silence as 3 human ship's crews stood before them. Dr. Reynolds, now captain of the Hope, stood at the podium where Walker had once stood. Beside him, Dr. Green held a sealed container, the last sample of the pathogen, now completely neutralized. Engineer Wilson stood on his other side, his uniform bearing the marks of battle, but his posture straight with pride. The council leaders spoke first, their silver skin reflecting the chamber's lights. "We have gathered to honor those who did what we could not. Those we once mocked as overcautious, as fearful." They paused, all 4 arms lowered in respect. "We were wrong." Reynolds looked at the faces of his crew. They had lost 14 people, including Captain Walker. But they had saved thousands and stopped a threat that could have consumed the galaxy. "You don't honor us," Reynolds said, his voice clear and strong. "You honor every human who taught us to be careful, every firefighter who checked their equipment before running into flames, every doctor who carefully put on protective gear before treating deadly diseases, every space pioneer who insisted on one more safety check before launch." Dr. Green stepped forward, placing the sealed container on a pedestal. The pathogen was created by those who thought caution was weakness, who believed that merging life forms and machines without proper safeguards would lead to rapid evolution. She looked around the chamber. They forgot the most important lesson. True progress comes from careful steps, not reckless leaps. The blue-skinned representative who had once laughed at human caution stood up. "We have examined your ships, the safety systems we mocked. They saved not just your lives, but all of ours. The quarantine protocols we called excessive. They contained a threat we couldn't even face." Wilson nodded. "Because we planned for the worst while hoping for the best. That's not cowardice. That's wisdom." Images appeared in the chamber's holographic display. The rescue missions, the battles, the final confrontation. The council watched in silence as they saw how the human crews worked. Carefully, methodically, even in the face of horror. Captain Walker's last words, Reynolds said, his voice thick with emotion, were that being careful doesn't mean being afraid. He proved that with his life. They all proved it, every crew member we lost. They were careful right until the moment they had to make the ultimate sacrifice. The council leader raised a hand. "We have prepared a memorial for your fallen. But we would also ask something else of humanity." They paused, looking around the chamber. "Will you teach us?" Reynolds blinked in surprise. "Teach you? Your ways," the leader continued. "Your protocols. Your careful approach to danger. We have learned that there are threats in this galaxy that cannot be defeated by advanced weapons or powerful shields alone. Sometimes, the difference between survival and extinction is a properly checked safety seal." Dr. Green smiled slightly. "That's why we came out here. Not to prove we were better, not to show off, but because we knew that if something went wrong, we would be ready. And if we weren't ready, we would face it anyway, not with reckless courage, but with careful determination." The chamber erupted in applause. As it died down, Reynolds took one last look at the images of their fallen comrades. "We accept," he said. "We will teach what we know, and we will learn from you as well. Because that's another thing humans understand. No one has all the answers. We can only find them together." As the ceremony ended, the crews of Hope, Mercy, and Courage stood together, remembering their lost friends. They had redefined courage for the galaxy. Not as the absence of fear, not as reckless action, but as the willingness to face danger with both determination and wisdom. And somewhere, they knew, Captain Walker was proud. Because in the end, it wasn't humanity's strength that had saved the galaxy. It wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their caution, their care, their unwavering dedication to doing things the right way, even in the face of mockery and doubt. The cowardly humans had stepped up, and the galaxy would never be the same.